The whole divide and the polarization that we now see in political debate, I think, is becoming common across the world.
Now, do you see any connection really between what went on in Pennsylvania at the weekend with Donald Trump and your own experiences?
I think obviously, America has a very different approach to guns than we do, but the whole divide and the polarization that we now see in political debate, I think, is becoming common across the world. We've seen in some ways that's replicated in France recently. And I think what we're kind of missing is the debate seems to be about more security around elected officials and politicians. And I think that misses the point. Just more rings of steel, I think, is not the answer, because it's not actually addressing the issue of why people feel emboldened to actually attack officials and politicians. And that's the bit of the debate that's missing.
What actually happened to you? What was your experience?
So I'd had a couple of run-ins. I had a couple of run-ins, two run-ins with an organization called Muslims Against Crusades. And that organization was now prescribed. They were behind, I think from memory, the stabbing of Stephen Timms and numerous other terrorist incidents. And they came into surgeries to abuse me. I was then targeted by Ali Habibi Ali, who went on to kill David Amess. And he was in Finchley on the 17th of September 21, had done several recces. And by pure fluke, the night before I would have been in Finchley for my usual Friday advice surgeries, I got reshuffled into a different department. And so I went into Westminster. Otherwise, I suspect I would have been attacked. And then on Christmas Eve last year, my office was set alight as an arson attack. And it created about £120,000 worth of damage, and my office was out of action for about 3 months. So after the run-in with Ali Habibi Ali, I'd already started to have my office and my home completely rebuilt with panic buttons, security lights, new windows, stab vests on public meetings where I knew I would be, and also trying to avoid public transport wherever possible. But the fire really was the final straw. My husband and family said, "That's it, you're done." And when I explained it, it appeared to be just a random, what I call a random scrote, having a go at the office. My husband said, "I don't really care what the motivation is. If you're dead, you're dead."
So you've had to give up your career, as it were. What are you doing instead?
Well, I'm looking for work. And so at the moment, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend a couple of months just having a look around, deciding what I want to do. It's a real wrench because being a member of parliament is an amazing job. Like every job, it has its ups and downs, but it's a fantastic role. And I genuinely are worried about the tone of debate, especially women MPs get it far worse than men. But the tone of debate is getting worse. And I think that, we can talk about security, but some of the issues about the role of social media in emboldening people to attack public figures and then feeding the narrative or feeding the views of those people who want to have a go at politicians is something that needs to be addressed.
Robert Halfon, the former Conservative minister, I mean, he told Matt Chorley that he thought that maybe close protection officers for every MP were the answer. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I mean, and it's an easy solution, but one of the great beauties of our parliamentary system is the accessibility of our MPs. And I wouldn't want to change that. We have to be sensible and we have to take precautions. I mean, I used to carry, all MPs have the ability of carrying, it's like a key fob, which gives you an immediate SOS to the control room, or you can open a phone line. It's GPS tracked if you are having to escape rapidly. You can take sensible precautions to keep yourself, to reduce the risk. But just giving us good protection officers, it changes the whole dynamic. That ability to mix with your constituents, I think, makes us better members of parliament. The fact that we have to go to the supermarket alongside our constituents and have to defend our actions, I think, is a strength. But again, the issue is, why do people feel that politicians are fair game? And that's we don't teach critical thinking in schools. People just, if it's on TikTok, it must be true. And I know I sound a bit like an old fart, but people need to be taught that you get a point of view, you check that point of view. If you go onto social media and you start going down a particular route, the algorithms for that social media then feed that view, which just reinforces that rather warped view, if it is warped, and then can make it even worse. And that's part of the equation. that no one's really addressing.
So what do you think the answer is? I mean, obviously, you would like to better educate the public about the responsibilities of politicians and about how to conduct civilized argument, but that sounds like a very big ask. Is there a quicker fix?
I think one of the quicker fixes would be to ensure that there is very visible policing. That when someone in the public eye, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a politician, it could be broadcasters. You have your own problems. That there is a very swift action from the police, and that the consequences of that attack, whether it's verbal or physical, if it oversteps the mark, are visible, seen by others, so they know it's the wrong thing to do, and the consequences are severe. Because at the moment, you can abuse someone on Twitter, you can abuse someone to their face in a shopping centre. I mean, I was followed around Brent Cross with someone behind me shouting, "You're useless, you're useless." Now, it wasn't physically threatening, but it was bloody annoying to try and go about your daily life with a nutcase behind you. But the bottom line is that people need to know that robust argument is right, but if you overstep the mark, you'll have your collar felt.
And Stella Creasy's told us that, told the Times today, that she was basically told by the police to live with levels of intimidation, that was what went with the job. Do you think the police aren't just not taking this seriously enough?
Without knowing all the details of Stella, I mean, obviously I know Stella's had a rough time. And I could only talk about my local police, and they've been amazing at responding to any complaints that I've made about individuals and responded very quickly. But I think there is a general acceptance amongst the public and to a degree the media that a level of abuse is par for the course, that it is just, well, if you don't want, if you don't like the heat, don't go into the kitchen, so to speak. And so I think that is also a bit of a line that needs to be revisited. Have we got it right in the media? Have we got it right as to what is acceptable? And where is the line between a robust debate and it becoming abuse? Freedom of speech is not the same as freedom to intimidate.
We've had, of course, the murder of Joe Cox in 2016 and then David Amess in 2021. Do you fear that this could happen again to MPs in this country?
Oh, inevitably. I have no doubt that at some point there will be an individual that becomes fixated. Every MP, I mean, when I decided to step down, 4 colleagues told me that they'd had people in prison for basically death threats, and 1 colleague had someone in prison for stalking, and that was just in the few days after I announced my decision to step down. I spoke to the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, who, to be fair to Lindsay, this weighs very heavily on him. He takes it incredibly seriously. And I asked him, why aren't we publishing the data? Because every incident, whether it's low-level graffiti, whether it's someone, bricked through the window, or something even more serious, is reported to our parliamentary security team. It's all logged. And I said, why aren't we publishing the full data of what's going on so people can see the scale of the problem? And he was rather worried about the fact that it would encourage copycats. And I think, I said to him, I think it's a bit late for that. I think we're already getting it. But he did comment that one of the big problems now is that when they complain to the social media companies about the online abuse, nothing happens. And that's certainly my experience as well. If you raise a complaint with Meta, then they either come back and say there's nothing to answer. I got sent pictures of dead babies on Instagram, and I reported it, and he came back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't breach our guidelines." I felt saying, "Well, what kind of guidelines do you have? Is sending pictures of dead babies is acceptable?" And so, the issue is about the social media companies are not handling complaints at all. If they do decide to investigate them, they're certainly not handling them swiftly enough. And it's a real difficult one to get right, Alan. What is freedom of speech? And I get that. But I don't believe that what we're seeing now it needs to be addressed, that social media companies are simply fueling the problem and not addressing it.